Did your care provider or the hospital staff just tell you that there is a policy about you not having food or drink during your labor? Okay, well, before you actually believe that, if you are planning a natural birth, then you need to know that this can actually undermine your confidence in your body's ability to birth. It can lead to unnecessary medical interventions, and it can also sabotage your true natural birth. In fact, if you do not have food or drink during your labor, this could actually lead to a C-section that you weren't expecting. Hi, my name is Carly Bonderud, and this is the Empowered Birth Series, where I go deep into everything that you need to know to plan and get your empowered true natural birth. And if you've been following along with this series, then you know that we have been going into the 20 natural birth traps that you want to avoid if you want to have a natural birth. What is a natural birth trap? These are the things in our society and our birth culture and our medical system that basically undermine your confidence, lead to unnecessary interventions, and otherwise sabotage your true natural birth. Now, the thing you also need to understand is that a lot of these things are very common. You don't really think that they're a trap. You think that that's the way that birth needs to go, that it's for a healthy baby and a healthy mom. After all, the medical system wouldn't suggest anything if it wasn't necessary, right? Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. And if you read my book, Your Empowered Birth, then in chapter 1, I explain the natural birth traps as basically this. You thought you were doing everything right, but in the end, you tend to go down a certain path that leads to unnecessary interventions, even a C-section. And then you're going, what went wrong? Well, what happened is you fell into the natural birth traps, and you may have fallen into more than one. Now, the thing I also want to let you know about these deep dive masterclasses is that these are not short. You probably noticed the timestamp. Now, this is not fluff, and I'm not trying to sell anything, and you're not going to be sucked into some webinar where you only get 15 minutes of teaching and the rest is just me talking about myself. No, everything in Empowering Moms, I have a philosophy. Information is free. You only pay for access to me and my team. That means that you are free to go wherever you want inside of Empowering Moms. I put out the resources for you because I believe that information needs to be accessible. I'm really tired of moms coming into the mom groups and not knowing that they could have said no, or they could have stood up for themselves, or they could have actually said, you know what, I'm going to eat or drink in labor and it's going to be fine, and they aren't afraid. You see, the problem with the natural birth traps is they're usually based on fear or misconception as well. So when you're told something by your care provider, or when it's outside in society and they keep repeating it over and over again, what happens is that you unconsciously think that that is the way things need to go. But the problem with that is that they're usually operating in a medical-based model of birth that doesn't actually work. And they're also basing this without the context. If you want to know more about that, about context, I do highly suggest that you check out the Reset Your Mindset for Empowered Birth Challenge. You have two options within that. You can go to my Instagram and find the first set of videos inside of the mini challenge, or you can get the whole thing plus transcripts just by going and checking out the Reset Your Mindset for Empowered Birth Challenge inside the playlists. Now, I'm also going to add something else here. Have you checked the description of this video yet? If you haven't, then you may not have noticed yet. There is a transcript available. This is different than what YouTube generates automatically, because if you go down to the bottom, you're also going to see YouTube says generate transcript. You don't want that one unless you want a specific timestamp to tell you where to go next in the video. The transcript you want is the PDF file that I have personally put together for you that highlights the big takeaways of this masterclass. I've also embedded links inside of the transcript. That way you're not having to be like, well, wait, where do I go from here? Because the deeper you go with Empowering Moms, the more treasures that you are going to uncover. And I want to make sure that you have all of the pieces of the map. Because you know what? I believe that information has to be accessible in order for you to truly make an informed decision out of a place of power instead of a place of fear. So if you're still afraid that eating and drinking in labor is going to lead to aspiration and having problems during your birth, what this allows the medical system to do is continue to use these restrictions. And I'm going to go deeper into that. But first, I'm going to tell you how you want to use this masterclass. If you only have 5 minutes or less, then quickly go and download the transcript. Look it over, skim it, see what pieces that you want to get as the aha moments, and then save this video for later so that you can sit down and actually take notes. Because again, the deeper you go with empowering moms, the more treasures you're going to uncover. The next thing that you are going to want to do if you are watching the whole video, either now or later, is sit down where you're not going to be disturbed and take notes. Please treat this as if you were paying for it. This is basically me coming in here and teaching you inside of an actual class that I would otherwise be teaching if I was doing prenatal classes. But I don't do prenatal classes. Instead, I do something a lot better, which is basically instead of going over the typical childbirth education, I'm following the empowered birth method. You will learn more about that as we get deeper into this video and how you can apply the empowered birth method of advocacy and getting past your fear and getting your partner on board to support you, basically through this model of the food and drink. So if you want your care provider to actually allow you to have food or drink, you're going to want to follow that empowered birth method. I'll also give you some other tips as well to ensure that you're not starving. Because again, if you are restricted in your food and drink and you're planning a true natural birth, this is going to sabotage you. The other thing I'm going to let you know is that if you are going through these deep dive masterclasses, you're technically going through the do-it-yourself path. That means that instead of choosing to go the self-study route with some of my courses in which I put information in a specific order, you are instead picking and choosing from your own education and then finding those extra pieces that are relevant to you. Hey, I am perfectly happy to have you to do that. Because you know what? Sometimes that can be the most empowering thing for you, to know that you can find any information anywhere and get what you need without having to really go through somebody else's script. I am also going to say, though, that self-study is also free. So all you need to do is first check out the Reset Your Mindset for Empowered Birth Challenge if you haven't already done that. That will give you an idea of what self-study entails. I include homework. This isn't just information. Information is basically what these master classes are. I give you information that you would otherwise be paying for inside of an expensive course if I chose to keep things behind a paywall. But I don't. Information is free. You only pay for access to me. The reason for that, again, is because path number 3 is premium coaching, and I don't work with everyone that comes in. You have to be at a certain level. You have to show me that you've done the work, and you have to be able to afford it. And it's not cheap. So I know that because it's not accessible to everyone, I've basically opened up the self-study and I've opened up the do-it-yourself path. So if you are do-it-yourself, here is another way that you can get the most out of this masterclass and anything within the Empowered Birth series. The rule of 3 is simple. You watch something 3 times and then you get it. The first time, you're getting the overview. You understand now what's in the class. The second time you go through it, though, you've already had that initial baseline information. So you're not looking as a new person coming in. You're looking more as a seasoned student. So you're getting the same material, but now you can see a deeper level. And then you can start to get those aha moments. And then the third time you watch it, you're basically like, oh, I've got this. I now know how to apply this to my own situation. And then I can also take the empowered birth method, which I've also now integrated, and I can go and I can get my empowered birth. Because you know what? I am committed to you having an empowered birth, whether you work with me or not. Because when you have an empowered birth, you're an empowered mom for life, and no one can take that power away from you again. So if you are doing the do-it-yourself path, all I ask is that you pay it forward. Like, share, subscribe to this channel, pass this on to other moms. If you see any moms in those online mom groups and forums and they're asking about food and drink, drop this video and let them know that they actually can tell their care providers, I'm eating, I'm drinking, and I'm not going to be just having ice chips because that is not going to help me to have my natural birth. Because I'm going to tell you a story of a client of mine who had basically been starved in her first birth, and that is what led to her C-section. And she had said that when we got into our group coaching program together, and I'm like, well, that's not happening this time. You're going to get your turkey sub. So keep watching because I'm going to share stories, I'm going to share tips, and I'm going to share how to go deeper. I'm also going to share additional resources outside of empowering moms that you may want to take advantage of because wisdom comes from multiple perspectives. The other thing is that if you do want to support the empowered birth movement, my book is available on Amazon. You can see it behind me, Your Empowered Birth. You can also check out Goodreads if you want to leave a review. Because guess what? I've also got the book on YouTube. Again, information is free. I only charge for access to me, which means that you can get the whole book inside of the playlist, listen to it. If you like it, if you want to support the empowered birth movement, then you can pick up a copy, preferably the paperback, so that you have a copy in your possession that you can then hold up and share with your friends and lend out to people. Because all the proceeds that go to the empowered birth movement, I'm going to be scattering back out. I don't think it's right that we still have hospitals that are restricting food and drink. And I don't think it's right that a lot of moms are being pushed into the hospitals when they would rather birth at home. I also don't think it's right that a lot of midwives are not being funded properly, so they're not able to practice very long. It's not sustainable for them. So all of the proceeds within the empowered birth movement are basically going to go towards making more access for moms to be able to have midwives and for midwives to be paid fairly. Same with doulas, and to open up more out of hospital spaces so that moms can feel confident and we can start to shift our birth culture away from this culture of fear and control. Because when that happens, what this will allow the hospitals to do is to start practicing and supporting true natural birth. Because the whole idea of the empowered birth method is aim for a true natural birth and then pull back only as much as needed. And restricting food and drink, that's definitely not needed. Okay, so as I said, what we're going to be covering in this video is basically I'm going to share a story now. Then I'm going to tell you how restricting food and drink actually leads to you falling into the traps, how it undermines your confidence, how it leads to unnecessary interventions, and how it sabotages your natural birth. I'm also going to do a caveat and explain to you how this came to be a practice in the first place and why. I'm going to give you the historical context. I'm going to give you things that you might want to consider when thinking about eating and drinking in labor, including the kinds of foods that you'll want to consume. And then I'm going to also tell you about applying this with the empowered birth method. And finally, I'm going to tell you about those 3 paths I mentioned of do-it-yourself, self-study, and premium coaching, just in case you want to know where to go next in your next steps. And then lastly, I will finish off with a recap. I will tell you about what's coming next in the Empowered Birth series, and then I will sign off. Okay, so sound good? All right, so let me tell you this story, okay? Because it's really important. When I was a newly certified coach and I was getting my first clients, Jenny's friend Lisa actually came to me. If you want to know more about Jenny's story, you can go and check out her story inside of Your Empowered Birth. I've also done interviews with her. Jenny is technically the co-founder of Your Empowered Birth Academy. She basically had looked at my website way back in 2020 and said, wait a minute, how do I take your classes? And I didn't have any. So Jenny compiled everything that she wanted to learn. And then she said, teach this. I said, okay, but we're going to need some more students. And I need to also get my feet wet and learn how to do these challenges. So I ran the very first Empowered Birth workshop, which I will talk more about what's in that when we get into the deeper dive later in this masterclass. But basically, this was a free challenge that I put on Facebook through a Facebook group. And I was just teaching for about 7 days and telling moms all of the secrets that their care providers probably didn't want them to know or didn't know themselves. And so Jenny had decided to bring Lisa in because Lisa was pregnant with her fourth baby. Lisa had 2 C-sections. The first was with her singleton baby, and the second was with her twins. And she was pregnant for a third time, and she did not want to have another C-section. She was really frustrated with our medical system, and she was really frustrated with people telling her that she was too old, too fat, and had 2 C-sections, and therefore needed to have another C-section. Now, here's the thing is that Lisa did end up having that C-section, but it wasn't because her body was broken and defective. In fact, she had been going into a very smooth labor by the time things actually got going. Her waters had released. She was close to pushing her baby out. But what happened is that she did not have pillar number 5, the right support. And her partner and her mother actually pushed her into the hospital. Now, I'm not going to make them wrong for that because they were actually terrified. They thought something bad was going to happen to Lisa if she didn't do this. But the thing I need you to understand is that if you do not have all 5 pillars optimized, which I'm going to tell you more about when I get to the empowered birth method, this can derail your birth plan. But let's just backtrack here. So with Lisa's first baby, she wanted to have a natural birth. And she was in labor and she was in the hospital like most first-time moms, but they wouldn't let her eat. And because they wouldn't let her eat or have anything to drink, and it was just ice chips, Lisa started to get tired and she didn't have the strength to keep going in her labor, which meant that she failed to progress and it led to a C-section. This is very, very common. So you need to understand that this is common. And, I also had this happen in my own labor with my daughter, where I hadn't really been that hungry during the stop and start labor. And I noticed when my labor shut down after the cervical check. Go and watch the video on natural birth trap number 3, which is vaginal exams, to know more about that story. But the second part of why my labor had not been progressing before the cervix check and before my labor officially shut down was because I hadn't eaten anything for several hours. The last piece of food that I had basically had been about, I'd say maybe afternoon. And I hadn't really wanted to eat much. So I maybe had a few chicken strips and that was it. I was more focused on labor. And the thing is that if you do not eat and you do not drink, your body is naturally going to slow down your labor or even stop your labor so that you can start focusing on food again. So when my labor stopped, I had also recognized I'm hungry. So I first started to eat a little bit of a hamburger that my now ex-partner had prepared. And I was just sitting there on my ball when the midwife was like, okay, you've eaten, but labor still hasn't started up. And it's now been a while and nothing's happening. And if it continues like that, I'm going to have to consult an OB because this labor has stalled out after you've been at 6 centimeters. I didn't want that. So instead, I sent the midwife home and I went to sleep. And then when I woke up at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was ravenously hungry. So I went into the fridge and I got my sub sandwich that I had put away the night before. And I started eating all of that. And then I went and I got my hamburger that I hadn't finished and I ate all of that. And by about 5 o'clock, I was full, I was happy, and I was back in labor. And 5 hours start to finish, my daughter was born into the pool, almost completely unassisted. All the midwife did was pull her from the water. And I now recognize as a doula and as a mom that you need to eat and drink. Okay. So I also understood now that I didn't know then is that sometimes you need to also be hydrated to ensure that you don't have really painful contractions or that they don't feel more painful than they actually are. Like early labor, if you happen to be really dehydrated, you're going to feel more pain than if you are fully hydrated and your body is now moving through the rhythms and has that energy to sustain it. Now, another thing is that inside of, I think it was Ina May's book, but don't quote me on that. I'll have to double check. But they basically said that what one of the remedies were for a woman whose labor had stalled or slowed was to give her teaspoons of honey, because this would then give her that quick jolt to be able to keep going. So, one of the things you're going to really want to know about is to maybe have some protein on hand, something that's easy to digest, and something that's not going to feel awful if it does come back up. Because the whole reason why the medical system actually wants to stop you from eating and drinking is because they're like, well, you'll throw it all up anyway. But that is part of your body's natural process. Because if you're vomiting, you're also heaving, and that could help open your cervix. In fact, you might feel nauseous in labor deliberately so that your cervix starts to open. And I noticed that too. So, recognizing from this story, how does restricting food and drink actually undermine your confidence, sabotage your natural birth, and lead to unnecessary interventions? How is it a trap? Well, first of all, with undermining your confidence, if you have not been eating and drinking because you're not allowed, this can then lead to you thinking that it's your body that's broken because you're not dilating fast enough or your labor contractions aren't that strong. But the truth is that you're just hungry. You're just not able to do the work yet. You need to eat. You need to drink. So when they restrict that, you're thinking it's you. You're thinking you're the problem. I can't even count now how many moms have shared stories where they're like, well, I just didn't dilate. And I'm like, well, what happened? And Lisa had said the same thing. I didn't dilate. I'm like, well, what happened? She's like, well, I got to the hospital and I was really hungry and I was not given any food. And I'm like, well, of course you wouldn't dilate. And she's like, wait, what? I'm like, well, you were starved. Of course you wouldn't dilate. Your body is now focused on you getting food. So you're going to slow down your labor to get food. And if they're restricting food for you, then that's not going to help you. And so this is what happens a lot of the time is that you think it's you. And then you also now agree to the interventions. The other thing is if they have a policy that says that you're not allowed to eat or drink in labor, guess what else they're going to be pushing on you? The IV. That in itself is a natural birth trap, one of the later ones inside of the series. If you want the full list, go into the description of this video, get the transcript, and then go and check out the link that tells you the 20 natural birth traps. If you're actually reading the transcript itself, then you've probably already seen the link. So the thing that you really need to understand is that if you are introducing medical interventions into your birth because you're not allowed to have food or drink, and they are saying, okay, now we're going to give you the IV for fluids and for nutrients, and you're also dealing with painful contractions that aren't doing anything, they're going to suggest next that you get Pitocin or they break your waters. And then it might be even more painful and you get the epidural. You fail to progress and then it could be a C-section. Not necessarily, but very highly likely that you could end up with a C-section. So you understand now that you're going to likely get pushed into more interventions if they're restricting food or drink from you. And how it sabotages your natural birth is that, again, if you're starving your body, physiological birth is not going to be able to unfold because your body needs to have fuel in order to run, and it's not doing that. So yeah, your labor is going to slow down. It's going to stop. It's going to be more painful. and you're going to end up too exhausted to actually push your baby out. So, if there happens to be a policy that restricts food or drink, you need to know this. It's for the hospital, that's not for you. And it doesn't make any sense anyway. So, why do they do this? Well, the reason seems like it would be logical when you're going through a certain context. Today, it makes absolutely no sense. If you check out Evidence-Based Birth, Rebecca Decker actually does an article on restricting food and drink and how it's not evidence-based practice. Hensi Goer also talks about this inside of the Thinking Woman's Guide to a Better Birth, as does Rachel Reed in Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage, and Ina May talks about it in Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. I mean, this is something that a lot of doulas and midwives already know, and we basically say, hey, feed that mom. But the medical system has a different lens. They have the lens of fear of something going wrong. So the reason why they restrict food and drink is because in case you have a C-section, you could aspirate if you are unconscious. This was their entire logic for it. You can't have food or drink because if you have a C-section, you could aspirate and then that could cause problems. But here's the thing that they keep missing. Why are you going to automatically be assumed to have a C-section? If you're having a true natural birth and following your physiological process, it is far less likely that you're going to have complications. So why are they automatically assuming this? Well, if we go back to when the hospitals first became a thing, we're looking at the Industrial Revolution. We're looking at a time when women were very, very poor and could not have doctors come to the house. Only the rich really had that luxury. And because the midwives had also gone away and nobody was able to attend births because they were all factory workers or they were impoverished, even worse than that, in order to allow women to birth with any attendance at all, they put them into the hospital. You can learn more about this inside Rachel Reed's book, Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage. I believe it's in chapter 2. But what you need to understand is that in order for that to be sustainable, the medical system had to make it an assembly line. So they had all of the women inside of these hospital beds. And later in the 1920s, they also introduced twilight sleep. So the Industrial Revolution with the hospital beds, it was already a problem, and a lot of women ended up having severe complications. They ended up having severe infections, and a lot of them did die. But you also have to understand that before that, they weren't restricting food or drink. It was just like you're in labor and like things are fine. But when they introduced twilight sleep, the women had food in their stomachs, but they were also drugged up on scopolamine and Demerol. And they were strapped to the beds. They were basically unconscious, unable to move. And then they would be vomiting and it would go back into their lungs. And then that became really scary for the medical system. And they're like, oh, well, now we can't let pregnant women who are in our labor ward have food or drink because this is what can happen. But they didn't recognize is that that was not a physiological birth. So when the twilight sleep era ended and women started to ask for more autonomy, they still had the same practice in place. A lot of women were still having episiotomies done because babies got stuck. I mean, if mom is starving, she's not going to be able to effectively push her baby out. So then they had the episiotomy and then they had the forceps delivery. And then on top of that, when women started to get even more agency and they'd bring their partners in, still it was just ice chips. If you look at any of the sitcoms in the 90s and even 90s movies, there was still that prevalence of the just ice chips thing. The mom would be like, get me a hamburger. And they'd say, well, we can't feed you. And she'd look at her partner and she'd be like, you get me something to eat like right now. Like I am not kidding around here. I don't want to be starved. So it was a whole big thing. And understanding is that your mother may have already experienced this. If we're still doing this today in a lot of hospitals, now it's because of the fear of the C-section, the crash C-section. But you also have to recognize that a lot of labors are being induced, which is leading to Pitocin use, which is also leading to fetal distress, and it's leading to more pain, and it's leading to the epidural, and then it's leading to the C-section. So if you are having a natural birth, you're not having any of those interventions, which means that none of that fear of aspiration actually applies to you at all. It really only applies if you are having more interventions. You may want to think about that ahead of time, because if that's the case, if you're already going for a C-section, then yeah, you probably don't need to have food or drink because you're going for a C-section. And typically they ask you to fast before major surgeries. But I'm also going to caveat that. Say you were in a car accident and you suddenly needed to have major surgery. Are they really going to say, hey, wait, did you eat or drink before you actually got into the car? No, they're not. They're just going to perform the surgery. So even though there is a slight risk of something happening if you have had food or drink in your stomach during the surgery, it's still negligible in the idea that you're still going to be able to have the C-section if you really needed it. So don't restrict your food and drink. Now, I do also suggest that you go to the hospital at the last possible minute. That way you can have free reign of whatever foods you want. Sure, you could pack a little bit of stuff inside of your bag and eat it at the hospital, but you might not even want to by that point, or you might want something different. And this is why I suggest you stay home as long as possible so that you can take advantage of all the food. Now, what do you want? You want easy to digest proteins. You want eggs, you want oatmeal, you want something that isn't going to turn your stomach. Probably stay away from carbs because they can be really dense and they're not fun coming up. You don't want to be throwing up spaghetti. It's not so bad if it's oatmeal or eggs. So recognize what foods would you normally eat if you were feeling queasy? And think back to the beginning of your pregnancy if you had morning sickness. What stuff was appetizing to you that was nourishing and what wasn't? Sometimes midwives even feed moms spoonfuls of peanut butter. Of course, if you are allergic to nuts, that's not the best idea for you. But, you can probably get a good effect with honey as well. So you want to recognize that if you are eating and drinking in labor, and coconut water is a really good beverage to have for hydration, then you are more likely to have the energy that you need. And that leads into the empowered birth method. Because to apply this, you really need to understand the right mindset and get past your fear. You need to be able to see what the medical system is actually doing here. They're trying to scare you into thinking what might possibly maybe happen if you have food and drink in your stomach, as opposed to recognizing that you're going to be able to birth your baby with or without their help. So if you're going for a true natural birth, the physiological process, you don't actually need permission to eat or drink. What you need is for them to get past their fears. And there is a whole process around that as well. But recognize if you're not afraid, they can't push the button on you to stop you from having that sandwich or having that bowl of soup or otherwise not following that policy that the hospital has. The other part of the right mindset is basically knowing that you are your own best expert and nobody else can tell you what is best for you. And then that leads into the right education. You need to know your rights. You need to understand about hospital policies. Kristen Pascucci of Birth Monopoly actually has a Know Your Rights course. She also has a lot of literature that tells you what your rights are. But, nobody's actually allowed to starve you. They are not allowed to not allow you. And if you know that, then when they say, oh, we don't allow food or drink, it's just ice chips, you can be like, that's nice. I am choosing to have food or drink. I assume all responsibilities and I am educated on the subject. Again, Rebecca Decker also has an article on evidence-based birth that tells you about the actual evidence for food or drink in labor. So understanding you have the right education, the next thing is you need the right environment. First of all, don't go to a hospital that restricts food and drink in labor if you don't have to. If you have other options, choose a more baby-friendly and mom-friendly hospital. Or better yet, have an out-of-hospital birth experience either in a birth center or at home, because you're more likely to get the support you need if there is already something in place to support a physiological process, not a medical one. We can't ignore the fact that the medical system and hospitals arose during a time where women were basically treated like defective machines. We can't ignore the fact that hospitals also have to deal with the overhead and the bottom line, and recognizing that they are needing to fill beds and empty beds, and it's just not sustainable for them to support a long physiological birth. You are much more better served at home than you are in the hospital if you are trying to have a natural birth. This is just the reality, which is again why you need the right mindset. Because if you still think that the hospital is the safest place and you still have those what if fears coming up, you're going to go into the hospital too early. And if they have this policy around food or drink, you may have somebody who is going to try to fight you on it. That leads to the right facilitators. The nurses and care providers, the doctors, even the doulas, they are all part of the right facilitators. They are people that have a little bit more knowledge and experience that they can then guide you. But notice how I say facilitator, not authority, because the fact is that they're supposed to look at what's going on and offer suggestions, but allow you to make the decisions. Now, doulas are much better at this than a lot of doctors are. And there's a lot of doctors that do actually support informed consent, and they are recognizing the harmful practices that happen in the hospital that derail physiological birth. They are out there. I found them. I've started to follow a lot of them, but they are also not always in positions of power within the hospital system. If you want to know more about that, you'll probably want to check out the Birth Advocacy Report. I have this inside the Empowered Birth Toolkit, as well as inside of your Empowered Birth Workshop through the email itself. You can also just reach out to me or my team, hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com, and we'll give it to you. Because again, you need to understand how the hierarchies are actually working in the medical system and what they're dealing with. They have a lot of fears. They have a lot of misconceptions. They may have been told that restricting food and drink is just what we do. And they may not have gone through all of the current research that tells them that actually this practice is not helpful. Now, the last one, you need to have the right support. If you happen to have some nurse who is now saying that you can't have food or drink, your partner needs to be like, here, babe, here, and feed you anyway. Okay? So you need to have them basically on board. Your friends and family, it can be helpful to have them actually support you, but they're not going to be the ones in the birth space. So this is probably not one of those conversations that you're really going to have them in your ear talking and undermining your confidence about what you can have. Same with the mom groups, though. If you go into the mom groups and you're asking about food or drink, and you're mostly going to get moms that are aware of this, because evidence-based birth has done a lot to try to debunk this myth. But there's usually a few of them that still are saying, well, my doctor says this, and I don't know, like, what do I do? How am I going to get through labor? I'm going to starve. And it's like, Well, yeah, if you follow that, yeah, you are going to starve because they shouldn't be starving you in the first place. This isn't evidence-based. Like, this doesn't make any logical sense whatsoever. When you think about the human body, this doesn't make sense. But it does make sense if you're looking through the lens of fear. And that's not what we want at Empowering Moms. We want you to come to your birth from a place of power instead of a place of fear. Okay, so I've told you about the different resources that you're going to want to take advantage of. And I've also told you about the story of Lisa and how she really just wanted that turkey club. And she just wanted some booster juice, actually, I think it was. And she just couldn't get it. And that led to her first C-section. And I also told you how this affected my labor and how I turned it around and I was ravenous the next night. And I told you about some ways to get some food into your system and what kinds of foods that you want. And I told you how the medical system undermines your confidence and sabotages your natural birth with this policy. But now that we've gotten to basically what is going on and why this is a trap and how you can get out of it, I'm going to also share with you how to go deeper with this. Because, it's one thing to know that you can refuse food or drink. It's another thing to be able to advocate strongly for yourself within the medical system. And part of the other deeper layers of the empowered birth method is you need to get past your fear. Then you need to enlist the support of your partner and get through their fears, because you can't hold space for someone and help them get past their fears until you've gotten past your own. Then after that, now you've got your support system, you're able to advocate for yourself strongly within the system. And this is when you can shift the power dynamic so that your right facilitator that you've hired is actually working for you, and maybe even changing the policies that they were clinging to out of fear. Again, if you want that birth advocacy report, all you have to do is either get your Empowered Birth Workshop, sign up for the newsletter at empoweringmomsbirth.com/toolkit. And hey, if you really want, you can just email the team, hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com, and one of us will give it to you. But to go deeper, you need to have more pieces of the empowered birth system. This is the do-it-yourself path, where you basically have taken any knowledge that makes you curious or intrigues you, or just maybe you just stumbled upon this one video and you're like, I've never even heard of Empowering Moms before. And this is amazing. Like, this is incredible. And she has a transcript and she has a system and she has a book. Like, wow, this is amazing. And I'm blown away. Hey, if that's you, if you're brand new, just say hi in the comments. I'm happy to welcome you here. Welcome to the Empowered Birth community. And also, I'm just going to let you know that if you did find value in this, please like, share, subscribe, and pay it forward. Because if you just stumbled upon this, you've discovered a treasure. And I want you to be able to distribute that treasure. We're not into hiding information here at Empowering Moms. We're here to basically make some waves, because a drop in the ocean creates ripples. Many ripples create waves, and enough waves can change the tide. So the thing about Empowering Moms, as I said at the beginning of this video, is that I have 3 paths for working with me and going deeper with the empowered birth method. The first is the do-it-yourself path, which you have just completed today through this masterclass. You can keep going through all the deep dive masterclasses. You can go check out the social media, go download the free resources off my website, get the transcripts, and follow your own path. Because some go this way, some go that way, but all ways are the queen's way, and you are an empowered birth queen. So recognizing that you can basically do this yourself. The reason for that is because the next level is basically subscribing to our self-study path. That means that you're on the newsletter. Now, you can do the newsletter with the do-it-yourself, but if you choose to do the do-it-yourself, you're going with the toolkit and you're going with the newsletter. But self-study, you got to do the work. And basically with self-study is you go through a course, and then you also go through the workbook, and then you get that transformation. But there's another layer to self-study, because maybe you do want a little bit of help. And that is the first level where you pay with self-study VIP. You still get the course, you still get to have all of the workbooks, all the materials, everything they gave out for free, but you also have something even more valuable for your money's worth. And that is direct access to me and my team, where you can ask your questions. You hit reply to any of the emails within the self-study course itself. That indicates to us that you are a self-study student. And then we're going to guide you further. We're even going to go one layer deep, where if you ask a question and we don't already have a resource created, we'll create one for you. And then we'll also give you first dibs access to it, because you are the empowered birth queen who came up with it, right? You prompted us, you asked us the question, we gave you the value, and now we've given it to you and we're putting it out there, but you get first access before it's even available to the rest of the public through the do-it-yourself path. The other piece of self-study VIP is a little bit more work. You need to have completed your workbook and gotten far enough along so that when you bring us your homework, we can go through it and then we can be like, okay, if you're ready for your call, your deep dive laser coaching session, then we'll book that for you. And we will make sure that everything that you've put out is optimized, because I'm committed to you having an empowered birth. And you can decide if you want to work deeper with us or not and go beyond just birth with our premium coaching model, because when you have an empowered birth, you're an empowered mom for life. No one can take your power away from you again. And there's far more layers than just the self-study. So the clients at the highest level transformation, though, this is why I don't work with just anyone. We usually sit down together and we are mapping out the entire empowered birth plan. We are mapping out how to go forward with a care provider, how to get the partner on board, and it's completely custom tailored to each client. So I can't even tell you specifically what the premium coaching entails or what the package is, because as I said, I don't work with just anyone, and this is deeply exclusive. So that is why I only have the self-study path. You can do self-study VIP, get a taste of the laser coaching. If you love it and you want more access, then that's when we talk about maybe getting on a call and seeing if it's a good fit. But if it's not a good fit yet, I'm going to redirect you to other resources, but you're still going to stay inside of the community, because I am committed to you having an empowered birth. And you are important no matter where you are on the journey. No matter if you are just a do-it-yourselfer and you haven't subscribed to the newsletter, please just like, share, subscribe, pay it forward, communicate, just put things in the chat. Let's get this going. Let's get the algorithm to see us. And the way to do that is for you to comment and to engage, because the more you engage, the more other people will stumble across this. If you're in any mom groups, tell them about Empowering Moms. Tell them about your empowered birth. Again, the book is on Amazon. You can learn more about it on Goodreads. And if you really just want to check it out or have somebody else check it out, I read the whole book to you inside the playlist. The Reset Your Mindset for Empowered Birth Challenge also will help you get past any underlying fears and help other moms to get past underlying fears. Because again, I am all about you having all of the tools to get your empowered birth. Every birth can and should be a beautiful and empowering experience. Okay, so now that you understand about those three paths, I'm just going to recap for you. So what did you learn? Well, today you basically learned that eating and drinking in labor is important if you are having a natural birth. Now, you're probably not going to want to eat and drink in active labor, but you will want to do it in early labor. You want protein, you want foods that are easy to digest, and you also need to know that all of the restrictions around food and drink are basically because the medical system is in the lens of fear, and they can't really recognize that this policy came out from the twilight sleep era when everybody was drugged up on scopolamine and Demerol, and doesn't really apply today. And they also need to stop assuming that every single mom that comes to them is going to end up in a C-section, because that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. I also told you a little bit about how to get around this is that they are not allowed to not allow you. And you also need to be able to be strong in your advocacy. So that's basically the recap. And now I'm also going to just remind you, you've watched this video almost all the way to the end. Go back and watch it again when you have more time available. You're going to get some aha moments that you didn't have before. And the third time, you're going to have it integrated into your whole empowered birth journey. The other piece, of course, is that if you go into the other links inside of the transcript and go and get those additional resources, you're going to have the numbers, you're going to have the information, and you're going to have more sources because wisdom comes from multiple perspectives. And I want to make sure that you're not just taking my word for it, but you're also getting that education being like, yes, this is verified. Yes, other people experience this. Yes, I'm on the right track. Because again, information is free and it needs to be accessible because when it's not, you're still basing everything on a place of fear instead of a place of power. You're making a fear-based decision instead of an empowered decision. So thank you again for watching. If you found value, again, please like, share, subscribe to this channel, pay it forward. And next week, we're going to be talking about trap number 9, trying to get into labor and do all of the things, because this is another way that your body is getting exhausted. So stay tuned for that. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, subscribe to this channel, pay it forward, pass it on. A drop in the ocean creates ripples. Many ripples create waves, and enough waves can change the tide. So thank you again. Have a happy, empowered birth journey. Whether you are birthing a baby, birthing a business or creative project, or rebirthing a new version of yourself, remember that Empowering Moms is here for you. And I will see you next week. Namaste.